So you watched Game of Thrones or Vikings, and you're curious about mead, right? Or you're old school and you watched The 13th Warrior. Either way, you want to know, just what is mead? At its core, mead is fermented honey that you drink. That is way too simplistic and doesn't even begin to cover what mead really is. Let's go back to the beginning. In the beginning, there was no mead, but there were bees, and bees make honey. Now, honey alone won't ferment, as it's far too dense with the sugars in it, but it does contain yeast. Most all fruits, trees, leaves, and plants are covered with yeast. This naturally occurring fungus is what gives us fermented food and beverages like kimchi, sauerkraut, wine, mead, cider, and beer. So, right, the honey is too dense, meaning the water content is too low for yeast to do their thing. But if water got into the hive, or the honey was collected and added to a big container with the right amount of water, the yeast can begin building a colony and fermenting that honey into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Much like winemaking, mead making depends on a must and yeast. A must is just sugars in a liquid in the right ratio for fermentation by yeast. Must can be made with honey, sugar, maple syrup, fruit and their juices, etc. Obviously, since we're talking about mead, you want it to be all about the honey, so the rest of those wouldn't really be mead, but this shows the similarity in method and probably why many call mead honey wine. Throughout time, people all over the globe have been making mead in some form or another. A quick Google foo on the internet gives quite different results for how old mead is, and I won't even touch on the topic of which came first, mead, wine, or beer. Some say mead is 4,000 years old based on some evidence found in India. Others say 8,000 years. The oldest claim I saw said 20,000 to 40,000 years from Africa. Now, I'm not saying that that's wrong, just 20,000 to 40,000, not exactly very accurate. So as you can see, there's some discrepancy on the topic. Suffice to say, mead is old, okay? Interesting note here. As much as mead is stereotypically a Northman brew, historical evidence suggests fermented honey beverages originated in Africa. So, we know what mead is, and how old it is, sort of. Let's get to what different people call it and the different varieties of mead, shall we? Fermented honey beverages from around the world. Finland makes something almost mead-like called sima. Ethiopian mead is called tej. In South Africa, mead is called, and I'm going to butcher this, Equilica. Yeah, let's go with that, Equilica. In the Philippines, they make bais, a native fermented honey beverage. Chuchen is a kind of mead made in Brittany. Szwarniak is a Polish mead. I probably said that one wrong too. Gwerk or Medovina is a Croatian mead. In France, mead is called hydromel, which is also a term used in the US for a lower ABV mead. Midas or Midas is a type of Lithuanian mead. Modu is a traditional Estonian mead. Mead is probably pronounced mead, is mead made in Russia, and they have several types. The Mayans made a mead-like drink called pizzeria. And I made that sound Spanish, but the Mayans are from South America, so it sort of makes sense. Biselovina, probably wrong, is a Slovak term for mead. Dandagare is a mead from Nepal made with herbs and spices. The one thing they all have in common is honey. That is what defines mead as mead. Some curious facts about mead. Mead can be high alcohol or low alcohol content. This makes it very versatile. Though there are some purists out there who say mead can only be honey, water, and yeast, still more see mead as something that can be mixed with fruit, herbs, and spices, as well as other ingredients. Now, to my knowledge and my experience and my thoughts, I would think that back in the day, very rarely was mead made with just water, honey, and yeast. I would think they were always trying to preserve some other food, trying to cover up flavors from maybe, spoilage or infection, or they were trying to just make it taste different or better. So yeah, I don't think that the purest version of mead was made all that often back in the day. Mead can be carbonated, which is also known as sparkling, or it can be still, which means not bubbly. Both are still considered mead. Mead was known as the nectar of the gods in mythology and was claimed to have been brought to the people by Odin, who took it from the giants, according to legend. There's a widely held belief that the word honeymoon came from giving a couple as much mead as they could drink for their first month of marriage, but this story was actually invented in Victorian times. Well, it sounds nice, it's just not really true. Speaking of adding things to mead, when you add things to a honey wine or a fermented honey beverage, other than just honey, water, and yeast, it sometimes has different names. While technically it's all still mead, there are many different names given to it, and it can get really confusing. But in spite of that, here's some of the subtypes of mead. Acerglyn is mead made with honey and maple syrup. Bilbamel is mead made with blueberries, their juice, or sometimes even just blueberry blossom honey. Black mead is a blend of honey and black currants. Blue mead has fungal spores added, lending a blue tint to the final product. Think like blue cheese. Bochet is a mead where some or all of the honey has been caramelized or burned, intentionally. Bochéomel is a Bochet-style mead that also has fruit added. Braggot was originally brewed with honey and hops, and later with honey and malt, with or without hops. Capsicumel is a mead flavored with chili peppers, and they can be either hot or mild. Sizer is a blend of honey and apple juice fermented together. Hydromel, while also the name for mead in France, as we said earlier, is also a type of mead that is lower in ABV and often carbonated. Melomel is a mead made with fruit and honey. This gets confusing since, say, a Sizer is also a melomel, which is in turn a mead, so any of those names would be accurate. Metheglin is a mead made with herbs and spices. Morat is a mead made with mulberries, but this would also be a melomel. Now we get onto the unusual names. Omphacomel is mead made with verjuice, which is unripe grape juice. So it's the juice of unripe grapes. So it's a type of piment. It comes from the Greek omphacomel, literally meaning unripe grape honey. Oxymel is mead made by blending honey with wine vinegar. A piment, which was referred to in the omphacomel, is a melomel or fruit mead that is made with grapes. So it's kind of a combination of wine and mead together. Quick mead is intended to age quickly for immediate consumption. It shares some qualities of cider due to its creation. It usually has a little bit of effervescence and it tastes a little bit like an apple cider. Red mead is made with red currants. Rhodamel is mead combined with rose, be it rose hips, petals, or rose attar, or even rose water. Sack mead is a mead with more honey than is typically used. This makes for a higher than usual alcohol content. This might surprise some people, but generally mead over 14% is considered a sack mead. And though dry sack meads do exist, most of them are actually made to be sweet. Short mead is made with less honey than usual and meant to be consumed immediately. To me, this is much like a hydromel, really, but it could be even like a quick mead. They're all sort of similar. Show mead has come to mean plain mead with no additions other than honey, water, and yeast. Traditional mead is normally synonymous with show mead being just honey, water, and yeast. And again, like I said earlier, I don't think that those two things were really a thing. I don't think most historical meads made in the home or made by people to consume were show mead or traditional mead. Not that there's anything wrong with making them. I'm just saying when people say that that's the only way to make mead, I'm not sure that that's so historically correct. I could be wrong. If somebody knows of any evidence showing that mead was really just made with honey, water, and yeast, please let me know in the comments below. I'm actually really curious about that. White mead is mead that is colored white with herbs, fruit, and sometimes egg whites. I kid you not. So there's a lot of names for mead. In the end, though, they're all mead. I would never fault you for saying blueberry mead, or apple mead, or even apple melomel, or spiced mead, or basically any other name that describes what you made. Honestly, the names confuse me sometimes and just get in the way of the true simplicity that is homemade mead. Mead is possibly the most versatile brew you can make due to a variety of alcohol levels, carbonation or no, and flavor possibilities. You can even age it on wood to add more flavors and complexity. You can hop it so that you have that hops flavor that everybody brags about. When all of this is taken into account, it's no surprise why mead has been made by so many for so long. Speaking of making mead, check the links in the description of this video and our channel in general for hundreds of videos on making mead, cider, wine, and beer. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.